I'll never forget the cold. Not the cold of the porcelain tiles, but the cold that wrapped around my heart when I hit the floor. It happened so fast. One minute I was stepping out of the shower, reaching for the towel rail. The next minute the whole world was a smear of white and pain. I didn't break anything, just a terrible purple bruise on my hip. But when I finally managed to pull myself up, shaking like a wet kitten, the fear was heavier than the pain. I was 71 years old. I had always been sure-footed. People think that when you retire you just sit still. Not me, not Betty. My Thomas died 8 years ago, but my hands never stopped moving. For 50 years I was a seamstress, hunched over that old Singer machine right in the living room, stitching uniforms, fixing wedding dresses, mending every hole life threw at us. My fingers, even with the arthritis, were still sharp. They knew their job. That house, this small New Jersey home, was built one needle prick at a time. It was my sanctuary. Old habits die hard, and mine was working, always working. The house was paid for, my own. After the fall, though, the house started feeling like a trap. I couldn't shake the image of hitting my head and just lying there until morning. The terror was overwhelming. I started walking hesitantly, like a cartoon character shuffling across ice. Soon I just stayed put. I avoided the stairs entirely. The fear of falling had locked me inside my own bedroom. At first, my daughter Carol was wonderful. She brought soup. She picked up my prescriptions. She talked gently. But that sweet concern curdled fast. It turned into impatience. "Mom, you just have to try to walk." Carol snapped one afternoon. She watched me struggling to make it the 15 feet to the bathroom, clutching the furniture. "This isn't healthy. You're giving up." "I can't, dear," I whispered, holding the bedpost until my knuckles were white. "I feel dizzy. If I fall again, I'll break something." She would just sigh loudly. She stopped seeing me, her mother. She started only seeing the house. Mark, my son-in-law, was worse. He's sharp-dressing, slick, works in real estate. He didn't even bother to hide his conversations. He'd stand right there in the kitchen, clinking his fancy wristwatch against the counter, talking loudly into his phone. "Yes, she's 71. Total care needed," he'd say, exaggerating the words. "Listen, the property value here is spiking, Carol. We need to act fast." Act fast! Those words were knives. Then came the suggestion of the nursing home. It was a cold, calculated hit, delivered with a plastic smile. "We can't handle this burden, Mom," Carol said, her face tight. She wasn't sad. She looked annoyed. Mark found a lovely facility, the Golden Meadows. All your needs met. It's safer. My sanctuary. My home. Purchased with 50 years of aching sacrifices. Now the people I had sacrificed everything for were viewing me as an inventory problem. That night, alone in the dark, I cried silent, hot tears. I wondered if I was truly becoming that helpless, the kind of old person who deserved to be shipped away and forgotten. But a little whisper started in my head, a tiny thread of suspicion that, once pulled, refused to break. Why does the dizziness seem worse every time Carol and Mark visit? I started paying attention. Really paying attention, like a seamstress inspecting a faulty stitch. I would feel fine in the morning. I'd eat my toast, slowly, carefully. Then Carol would come over full of forced cheer and insist on bringing me the calming herbal tea. It was always sweet with honey, but there was a strange, subtle bitterness underneath. 45 minutes after that tea, the room would spin violently. I couldn't stand. I was suddenly useless. I had never needed blood pressure medication in my life. Yet, every time I stood up when they were around, I felt like the blood was draining out of my head. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I started learning how to be quiet and observant. I noticed Mark rushing to put things away when I came out of the bathroom. I saw Carol's hand hovering over the small cupboard where I kept my vitamins. I noticed that when they made dinner, the salt shaker felt empty, and they insisted I eat a plate of their food, cooked in the living room, not my usual simple fare. I dismissed it. Paranoia, Betty. You're just old and scared. The next afternoon, Carol brought up the nursing home again. She insisted I sign the preliminary forms, right then and there. I begged for 2 more weeks. I needed time to think, time to get strong. Carol grudgingly agreed, but her eyes were cold and hard, like river stones. Mark didn't wait. He started forcing me to sign endless papers, insurance, transfers, things I didn't understand. He sat on the edge of my bed, holding the pen. "Just sign here, Mom. Be sensible. You need full-time care," he said, his smile too wide, too eager. I managed to delay him, saying my hands were trembling too much that day. That evening I was shaking, not from weakness, but from the raw fear that I wasn't going crazy. Something was wrong, fundamentally wrong, with the people who were supposed to be protecting me. I decided I needed a glass of water. It was a lie. I needed to hear something, anything, that would prove. I wasn't just losing my mind. I slowly shuffled to the bedroom door, keeping my weight heavily on the wall, exaggerating the shuffling Mark and Carol expected to hear. I leaned against the doorframe. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a loud, erratic drumbeat. I heard Mark and Carol whispering in the hallway. They thought I was asleep. Mark's voice cut through the silence, low but clear, laced with an excitement that made my stomach turn cold. The realtor said we could get nearly $400,000 for the house, all cash. Just make sure she signs those papers. Keep telling her she's unstable, if she continues to refuse. We may have to help her realize she has no choice. I already have the appointment scheduled for her evaluation next Tuesday. She won't argue when she sees what we're giving the doctor. The terror of Mark's whispered threat. She won't argue when she sees what we're giving the doctor. Cleared my head faster than any medication ever could. The fear of falling had been replaced by the acid burn of betrayal. It was one thing to be old and clumsy. It was another thing entirely to realize your own flesh and blood were working against you. I stood there in the dark, clutching the doorframe, my whole body vibrating. $400,000. My little house, the one I had stitched into existence, was just a number to them. And I was the problem they needed to get rid of. I couldn't just lay down and die, or let them drug me into oblivion. I knew I had to stop pretending I was confused. I had to look at everything fresh, like inspecting a seam I knew was crooked. I started tracking things with a little pencil stub hidden under my pillow. I wrote down the exact time Carol arrived, the moment she served the tea, and the time the world started spinning. It was never random. It always happened 45 minutes after the calming herbal tea. Carol arrived the next afternoon, bright as sunshine, and just as fake. She brought the usual mug. It was too sweet with honey. But the strange, slight bitterness was definitely there. "Here you go, Mom. It'll help you relax," she said, setting it carefully on the bedside table. Her eyes didn't look relaxed at all. They looked watchful. I nodded slowly, putting on my best dizzy old lady act. I took the mug and pretended my hand shook violently. I gasped just as I slipped, splashing nearly half the liquid onto the nice braided rug. "Oh dear! Look what I did," I whispered, my eyes wide with fake distress. Carol jumped up, annoyed, grabbing napkins. Mom, honestly, you have to be more careful. Now look at the mess. While she was wiping up the rug, back turned, I moved fast. I didn't drink the rest. I had an old, empty prescription bottle hidden under my mattress, the one for the light arthritis pain. I poured the remaining tea right into it. The liquid was thick, sugary, and smelled faintly medicinal beneath the honey. I capped the bottle tightly and pushed it deep under the mattress pad. My heart was beating like a hummingbird's wings. I felt sick to my stomach. Not from the tea, but from what I was doing. I was collecting evidence against my own daughter. It is what it is, I told myself. She made her bed. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I was trapped in this room, unable to stand for more than a minute without risking a fall. And I needed to know what was in that bottle. There was only one person I could trust, the one person who saw everything, but said nothing. Mrs. Kudo lived in the small apartment below mine. She was 79, a tiny Japanese woman who had been a physical therapist before moving to New Jersey. She was quiet, kept to herself, and always had a kind word. She also saw my comings and goings, or lack thereof. I had to get to her. I waited until Mark's truck was gone and Carol had stepped out to run errands, leaving me alone for maybe 20 minutes. Getting out of that room felt like climbing a mountain. I clutched the walls, moving an inch at a time, exaggerating the shuffling. When I reached the front door, I didn't open it. I went to the window, the one that faced Mrs. Kudo's garden. I knocked gently on the glass. It took maybe 10 seconds for her face to appear, framed by her tiny lilac bushes. She didn't look surprised. She just looked serious. She unlocked her window and slid it open a crack. "Betty, dear, you look terrible. Come in quickly," she whispered. I had to squeeze through the window, which was humiliating, but I made it. I collapsed onto her small, clean sofa. Tears sprang to my eyes right away. I pulled the little bottle out of my pocket, my hand shaking violently. I showed her the thick, syrupy residue. "They're trying to institutionalize me, Mrs. Kudo. They want to sell the house for $400,000. Mark said they were giving the doctor money to sign off that I'm impaired." I choked out the words, whispering the whole story, the fall, the dizziness, the sudden push for the nursing home. Mrs. Kudo listened to every word, holding the small bottle up to the light, turning it over and over. Her eyes, usually soft, were sharp and hard now. "I knew it," she finally said, her voice a low murmur. "I noticed the small daily habit, Betty. I noticed that when Carol visits, your gait changes. It's not the fear, dear. It's the medicine. And I recognize the symptoms." She walked into her kitchen and pulled out a small test kit she kept tucked away in a cabinet, one she must have used back when she was working. She scraped a tiny bit of the residue out of the bottle and began working carefully, mixing it with different solutions. "They are clever, Betty," she said without looking up. "You said your pain medication felt different sometimes. They are substituting cheap generic pain pills for your prescribed ones, which only dulls the pain but doesn't manage it. But this..." She pointed to the vial with the tea residue, which had turned a strange, murky blue. "This is why you fall." Mrs. Kudo explained it in simple words, the way I needed to hear it. Carol was crushing low-dose tranquilizers and a common blood pressure medication into the tea. "The tranquilizers make you mentally sluggish, so you look confused. The blood pressure medication, they give you too much. It's supposed to lower high blood pressure, but you don't have high blood pressure, Betty. When you stand up, your pressure drops too low, too fast. This is called orthostatic hypotension. You feel dizzy, you lose your balance, and you collapse." she finished, looking me straight in the eye. "They are giving you controlled falls, Betty," she stated, her voice tight. "The drugs are designed to make your mind clear enough to sign papers, but your body unresponsive enough to justify the nursing home. They want the doctor to see a woman who can't stand up without collapsing. The shock was a physical punch. My own daughter was systematically poisoning me to steal my house. The pain of the betrayal was worse than the purple bruise on my hip. I wasn't falling because I was old. I was falling because they were pushing me down." I sat there, frozen, feeling the anger rise up from the tips of my toes, a hot, powerful current that flushed out all the paralyzing fear. I was a seamstress. I fixed broken things. I would fix this. "What do I do, Mrs. Kudo? I can't walk. The evaluation is next Tuesday," I pleaded. Mrs. Kudo became practical instantly, the therapist taking over. She handed me a small, smooth, oval riverstone. "We fight them with strength they cannot measure," she said. "Your central nervous system has lost confidence in your legs because of the trauma of the fall, and the drugs made it worse. We need to reset your balance, fast." She explained that balance and knowing where your body is, in space, proprioception, is the fastest way to stabilize the core and prevent falls. "I want you to perform a single-leg balance drill. Stand on one foot, unassisted for 60 seconds. Do it on each foot, twice daily," she instructed, holding up one finger and then counting to 60 in a slow, steady rhythm. "No excuses. That is the quickest way to stabilize your core and prove they are wrong." She warned me that I would be shaky at first, but that the brain needed to relearn stability quickly. She also gave me a tiny digital recorder disguised as a keychain. "Get confirmation, Betty. Get them talking about the money and the doctor. And stop drinking the tea entirely. Tell them it hurts your stomach. If you must drink it, pretend to sip, then pour it out when they leave." I left Mrs. Kudo's apartment through the back door, carrying the weight of the new knowledge. I wasn't just old and scared. I was a target. My daughter was trying to poison me for money. My first 2 days of practicing the balance drill were agony. I would stand in the bedroom, gripping the solid iron bedpost, trying to lift one foot. I wobbled immediately. I'd lose my balance after 5 seconds. 10 seconds felt impossible. I had to cheat, putting my foot down, shaking with effort. But every time I felt discouraged, I remembered Mark's voice. $400,000. And Carol's cold, hard eyes. No pain. No gain. On the 3rd day, something shifted. I stood there, gripping the bedpost, and I lifted my left foot. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 25, 26. I swayed, but I caught myself. I managed 35 seconds before I had to put my foot down. 35 seconds! I felt a small, powerful connection returning between my brain and my feet. I also needed hard proof. I knew they would talk openly when they thought I was safely confined and drugged. Friday afternoon, Mark and Carol arrived, confident in my supposed rapid deterioration. Mark immediately started checking the house's exterior, taking pictures of the porch, frowning at the garage door, like a vulture circling. I was lying in my bed, pretending to sleep off the dizziness. I had pressed the record button on the keychain recorder and tossed it carelessly onto the bedside table, hoping they wouldn't notice it among my usual junk. Mark's voice cut through the silence, cold and clinical, from the living room. "The Golden Meadows transfer paperwork is ready. I'm meeting Dr. Weston at St. Jude's Private Care on Tuesday morning," he said. I could hear the faint clink of his expensive watch against the countertop. My heart hammered. This was it. He gets the $5,000 cash bribe and signs off on the cognitive impairment. Once she's signed into the nursing home, we get the legal POA, and the house sale closes next Friday. Mark continued, his voice laced with triumph. We're finally free of this burden, Carol. Think of the down payment. Then came the sound that shattered me entirely. My daughter's quiet, simple assent. Good. We just need her to hold on until Tuesday. It wasn't just Mark. Carol was fully in on the plot. My only daughter, actively plotting to lock me away and sell my home for her own gain. I lay there, not moving a muscle, tears silently wetting my pillow. 50 years of sacrifice, sewing dresses late into the night so she could have nice things. And this was my reward, being labeled cognitively impaired for $5,000 and a down payment. The grief was paralyzing for a full minute, but then the anger solidified. It felt like fire in my veins. The tears dried instantly. I was no longer grieving. I was fighting for my life. I wiped my face and sat up. I was 71, and they thought I was weak. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, they thought. Well, I was about to show them a few new tricks. I got out of bed, holding the post, and forced myself into the position Mrs. Kudo showed me. I lifted my right foot. I held it. 1, 2, 10, 30, 50, 60 seconds. I stood there, unassisted, focusing on the riverstone Mrs. Kudo had given me, focusing on the strength in my core. I did it again on the left foot. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a woman at war. From that moment on, I became an actress. Whenever Carol or Mark were near, I was the frail, shuffling invalid. I made sure to walk with extreme caution, often needing to be caught by Mark as I reached for something. I even practiced leaning too heavily on furniture so they could witness the severe instability. See, Mom, you almost fell again. Golden Meadows is really the best choice, Carol would say, trying to sound concerned, but I heard the impatience beneath it. I smiled weakly and nodded, ensuring they remained absolutely certain of my utter dependence. Meanwhile, I was meticulously gathering hard evidence. I had the recorder with Mark's confession, the small bottle of poison tea residue, and a new, secret regimen of balance exercises that was making me stronger every hour. I also needed proof of their method. Mrs. Kudo had suggested I track my own vital signs to show the intentional manipulation of my blood pressure. I found the old cuff Thomas used years ago in the linen closet, a real clunky mechanical one. Every day I took my blood pressure exactly at 8:00 a.m. before Carol arrived. It was always normal, maybe a little high from stress around 130/85. I wrote the numbers down on a small notepad I kept hidden inside my Bible. Then, when Carol insisted on bringing the tea, I would pretend to drink a sip or two, then pour the rest into the sink when she wasn't looking, making sure to flush it away fast. 45 minutes after the tea, just the 2 sips, I'd measure my pressure again. It was always dangerously low, sometimes dropping to 105/65. That sudden drop, exactly as Mrs. Kudo explained, was what caused the dizziness and the feeling that I was about to pass out. I wrote down the numbers, detailing the exact sedative effect and the intentional drop in pressure linked to Carol's visit. I was building a medical case against them, stitch by painful stitch. Mark, eager to finalize the plan and collect his $400,000, announced the transfer date on Monday. Tuesday morning, 9:00 a.m. We're going to the clinic for a simple checkup, Mom. Dr. Weston just needs to sign off on the paperwork. Don't worry, it's just routine. He lied, his smile too wide, too eager. That Monday evening, Mark came into my room, insisting I sign a stack of routine financial documents, the final transfer papers for the POA, power of attorney. He sat on the edge of my bed, holding the pen ready. "Just sign here, Mom. Be sensible. You need full-time care," he said. This was the hardest part of the plan. I knew I couldn't outright refuse without raising his suspicion. I took the pen, letting my hand shake violently, pretending to squint at the paper. Then I intentionally dropped the pen, letting it roll noisily under the dresser, just out of his reach. Mark groaned, annoyed, and bent over awkwardly to retrieve it. As his back was turned, I quickly and silently slipped the keychain recorder under his chair, switching it to continuous recording. Then I signed the document, not with my real signature. I drew a shaky, illegible squiggle that a doctor would indeed call cognitively impaired. I had signed my independence away, but only on paper. This signature would mean nothing later. Mark stood up, triumphant, looking at the scroll. "Good. Everything is set for 9 a.m. tomorrow, Betty. Enjoy your last night in your house." He collected the signed papers, patted my shoulder dismissively, and exited, locking the door behind him. I waited until I heard the heavy clunk of the front door closing. Then I walked to my dresser, not shuffling, not trembling, but stepping with firm, measured strides. I had achieved a full 60-second balance drill on both feet 3 times that day. I felt strong. I felt ready. I placed the blood pressure readings, the bottle of tea residue, and the keys to my safe deposit box into a large manila envelope. Mark and Carol thought they had won. They thought I would be sitting in St. Jude's private care, ready for Dr. Weston's $5,000 signature at 9 o'clock sharp. But Mark and Carol did not know that Betty had already made a call. A secret call to a different hospital entirely. One Mrs. Kudo recommended, Metropolitan Hospital. I had scheduled my own counter-evaluation with a reputable geriatric specialist, Dr. Shaw, for 8:30 a.m. I had 30 minutes to get clear of Mark and Carol, get proof of my recovery, and get back to St. Jude's. Not as a patient, but as an accuser. I looked at the clock. 8 more hours until the showdown. I needed to sleep, but I was too wired. I walked back to the center of the room, closed my eyes, and effortlessly lifted my right foot. I held it steady, counting silently to 60. My body, which had betrayed me, was finally listening again. They thought I was coming to the clinic to surrender. They were wrong. I was coming to the clinic to finish the thread they tried to cut. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story will travel. Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock a.m. Mark and Carol sat in the plush, cold waiting room of St. Jude's private care. Mark wore a suit that was too expensive for the occasion, and Carol kept smoothing her skirt, her face tight with impatience. They were waiting for the corrupt Dr. Weston, certain that I was already signed over to them, waiting meekly for my final evaluation. Mark checked his gold watch again, clearly calculating the closing costs of the $400,000 house sale. The front door opened, and Mark smirked, ready to guide the frail invalid toward her fate. But the woman who entered was not frail. I walked in, my posture erect, my stride measured and firm. I was flanked on my right by Detective Lieutenant Morales from the New Jersey Elder Abuse Task Force, and on my left by Dr. Shaw, a highly respected geriatric specialist from Metropolitan Hospital. Trailing slightly behind us was Mrs. Kudo, her tiny frame exuding silent, steely resolve. Mark's smug expression dissolved instantly. He stumbled to his feet, knocking his chair slightly. "Mom, what is this? Who are these people?" He stammered, his eyes darting to the envelope of transfer papers he held. I ignored him, my gaze fixed on Detective Morales. "Lieutenant, I believe Mr. Harrison and my daughter Carol were here for a transaction regarding my forced institutionalization and the illegal acquisition of my property. The evidence you require is in this manila envelope, and it is currently recording his denial." Detective Morales moved swiftly, securing the signed papers from Mark. Carol started to panic, attempting to reach for my arm. "Mom, you can't be serious. What lies are you telling them? You're dizzy, you know you are." I stepped back, perfectly balanced. My shuffling, timid walk was gone. I stood on my own 2 feet, refusing her touch. "No lies, Carol," I said, my voice steady, betraying no tremor. Only truth. I, who had entered shuffling, leaning on Mark's elbow just yesterday, now walked to the center of the waiting room. The expensive carpet felt solid beneath my soles. I performed the last piece of deception I needed to destroy. In the middle of the room, before the detective, the doctor, and my stunned daughter and son-in-law, I lifted my right foot and stood perfectly straight, unassisted. I held the single-leg balance drill for a full 60 seconds, my core solid, my gaze unwavering. "This exercise, recommended by my neighbor, cured the instability your drugs caused," I stated, lowering my foot without a wobble. "It allowed me to regain the strength you worked so hard to strip away." I placed the tiny keychain recorder onto the nearest table. Detective Morales pressed play. Mark's cold, clear voice filled the silent room. "He gets the $5,000 cash bribe and signs off on the cognitive impairment. Once she's signed into the nursing home, we get the legal POA, and the house sale closes next Friday. We're finally free of this burden, Carol." The sound of my daughter's quiet, complicit assent was the final brutal blow. Dr. Shaw spoke next, opening the manila envelope I had given him that morning. "Mrs. Harrison came to me for an independent evaluation at Metropolitan Hospital at 8:30 a.m. My review of her vital signs and the submitted residue is conclusive. Her baseline blood pressure was normal, 130 over 85 millimeters of mercury. However, the subsequent reading, taken shortly after ingesting the adulterated tea, dropped precipitously to a dangerous 105 over 65. This acute drop, orthostatic hypotension, perfectly simulates the dizziness and fall risk these two individuals fabricated to justify the nursing home placement. "Doctor," Shaw presented the small prescription bottle, "the residue tested positive for crushed sedatives and blood pressure medication. I can confirm this was intentional chemical impairment, designed to make Mrs. Harrison appear cognitively incapable." Mark tried to interject. "She's unstable. She's imagining things. She signed the papers." Carol broke first, tears streaming down her face, appealing to the only thing she had left. She lunged forward, grasping for my arm. "Mom, please, don't do this. I am your daughter, your only daughter. You can't send me to prison," she wailed, her voice laced with panic, appealing to the lifelong bond of motherhood. "You always said family was everything." I looked at the woman who had shared my life, now exposed as a calculating criminal. My composure did not falter. "I spent 50 years hunched over a sewing machine, stitching uniforms late into the night, making a home that no one could take from me," I stated, my voice quiet but absolute. "You tried to poison my body with sedatives, bribed a doctor with $5,000, and planned to steal my house for $400,000. You ceased being my daughter the day you saw my life as a financial inconvenience." I looked directly into Carol's eyes, severing the last thread of connection. "You are not my family. You are a criminal." Detective Morales immediately acted. He placed Mark and Carol Harrison under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse and attempted fraud. Mark, silent and defeated, simply offered his wrists. Carol's raw sobs echoed in the waiting room as the cuffs clicked around them, a sound sweeter than any melody. They were escorted out, their expensive clothing suddenly seeming cheap and false. The legal proceedings were swift and brutal. Mark and Carol Harrison were convicted on multiple counts, including aggravated elder abuse and conspiracy to commit fraud. Mark, deemed the primary architect, was sentenced to 12 years in a federal penitentiary. Carol received a reduced sentence of 7 years as an active accomplice. The judge ensured they lost everything they had sought to gain. The potential $400,000 sale of my home was dissolved. The value of their collective assets liquidated to pay legal fines and restitution to me for damages. Mark lost his real estate license and his retirement fund. Carol, besides serving time, was formally disinherited and forbidden any future contact with me. The community, having watched my descent into frailty, and now my public triumph, reacted with horror at the depth of the betrayal. Friends and neighbors cut ties with Carol and Mark. The people who should have been my protection were isolated and confined, paying the full price of their avarice. Mark is currently serving his time at a maximum security facility in New York State. Carol is in a nearby women's correctional facility. Neither receives visits from the extended family. 2 years later, I am 73 years old, and I am unrecognizable from the fearful invalid Mark and Carol had tried to create. I walk 4 miles every morning. I lost 17 pounds. My blood pressure, which they had artificially forced down to 105/65, stabilized permanently at a healthy 118 over 76 millimeters of mercury. I take no blood pressure medication at all. I fully embrace the health solution that saved my life, the balance training Mrs. Kudo taught me. With the settlement money received from the restitution, approximately $150,000 after legal fees, I founded the Betty's Balance Center, a non-profit operating right out of my living room twice a week. With Mrs. Kudo acting as my primary instructor and physical therapist, I now teach my peers, dozens of seniors across New Jersey, the critical importance of proprioception and fall prevention. My core curriculum revolves entirely around the single-leg balance drill, 60 seconds on each foot, twice daily. We also focus on simple exercises designed to improve stability, allowing the brain to regain confidence in the body. I share my story, stressing the importance of recognizing the intentional manipulation of one's health. We have helped over 200 seniors regain confidence in their balance, and several have uncovered similar, minor health manipulations by unscrupulous family members. I didn't just survive. I became a sentinel for the vulnerable. I reconnected with my distant niece, Clara, who now helps manage the center's social media and ensures that the house, the center of their greed, is constantly full of life, laughter, and good purpose. I often stand in my sunlit living room, watching groups of seniors effortlessly holding the 60-second balance drill. It is a room full of stability and strength. Mark and Carol had wanted this house empty, silent, and sold for cash. Today, my home is a fortress of freedom. I think about the Betty of 2 years ago, trapped by fear and chemical sabotage. My body was never the problem. My trust was. They wanted me dead, weak, and gone. But what they designed to make me collapse forced me to find the one strength I truly needed: perfect balance. The greatest justice is not the years they spend in prison, but the years I spend living fully, right where they thought I would fall. The revenge of a seamstress is silent, meticulously stitched, and permanent. The most powerful way to reclaim your life, I found, is simply to stand firm, unassisted, and refuse to go down. And if you stayed with me until the end, leave a comment letting me know what you thought of the story and what kinds of stories you'd like to read more of. Thank you so much for being here. See you in the next emotional story.